This video explains assignment 2-0, number 11. So this is a very classic factoring problem. It's a trinomial where the leading coefficient is not 1. And there are numerous ways to figure out the factors that would create this trinomial. I'm going to show you the way that I think is the most common way that students have learned how to do this, but if you've learned it another way and it's working for you, go ahead and continue doing it that way. So the first thing you want to do is create what we call a diamond. And so you take the first term and your last term and you multiply them together. So if I multiply 10 times -8, that's going to give me -80. And then you're going to look for two numbers that multiply to -80 and add to your middle term. Sometimes when people do this, they put the x's in here also. I do it just with the coefficients, but it works exactly the same way if you put an x squared and an x on the top. And now I'm going to think of some numbers that would multiply to give me 80 and would add to give me 11. And sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it's not so obvious. So you can start to list some factors of 80. 2 times 40, 4 times 20, 5 times 16, 8 times 10, and you could then reverse those also. And so if you look at those, you want to think if any of them would multiply, would add to 11. And because this is a negative here, it really means that you're going to be subtracting one from the other. And so hopefully you might notice that if you had made this a -5 times 16, that would multiply to -80 and would add to 16. So we're going to use -5 and 16. And the point of doing this is trying to see how you could take this trinomial and break up that middle term and change it into an expression that has 4 terms. So instead of writing 11x, I'm going to write -5x plus 16x minus 8. Because -5x plus 16x, if I combine those together, would give me 11x. These two expressions are equivalent. And then what you want to do is you want to break up your first 2 terms into a group and the second 2 terms into a group, and then you're going to factor it by using a process usually called grouping. And so what that means is you're going to look at your first 2 terms and you're going to take out your greatest common factor, or your GCF. So you want to think, what number goes evenly into 10 and 5? That would be a 5. And then there's also an x squared here and an x, so we could divide both of those terms evenly by x. So my GCF, or my greatest common factor, is 5x. And then I would think, what would I multiply 5x by to get a 10x squared? It would be 2x. What would I multiply 5x by to get 5x? It's going to be 1, and since there's a minus in front there, you're going to write that as -1. And then you're going to look at your next 2 terms and think, what is your GCF, or your greatest common factor, of 16x and 8? And 8 divides evenly into 16 and into 8. So I'm going to take out my greatest common factor is going to be +8. So I'm going to write +8. It's important that you always have a sign here. It could be a plus or a minus, but don't leave that blank. Otherwise, it looks like it's multiplied by the parentheses. And then you're going to think, okay, I'm going to multiply 8 by what to give me 16x would be 2x, and 8 times what would give me 8? 1, there's a minus. I'm going to keep that a minus. And then hopefully you notice that you have this factor in common. And so you could write that now as your greatest common factor of these 2 terms that are separated by your plus sign here would be 2x minus 1. And in your other set of parentheses is going to be whatever's left, because you would have to multiply 2x minus 1 times 5x to get this whole term. And you would have to multiply 2x minus 1 times 8 to get that whole term. And these are your 2 factors of your original trinomial. You can always check your work by using the distributive property to see if it takes you back to what you started with. So I'm going to do that over to the side here. And if I use the distributive property, I'm multiplying a binomial times a binomial. I'm going to use a little acronym of FOIL there. So 2x times 5x is 10x squared. 2x times 8 is 16x. Negative 1 times 5x minus 5x. Negative 1 times 8 is negative 8. If I combine my terms, I'm going to get 10x squared plus 11x minus 8. So by doing this process, basically you're just undoing the process of FOIL, you're undoing the distributive property, and you're thinking what would be my two binomial factors that if I multiplied them together would take me back to this trinomial. So you're just breaking down this trinomial into two of its factors. Factors are two things that would multiply together to give you a original expression.